A wonderful good morning and welcome to a new week with the electric trucker. I just picked up my trailer from the industrial area since I spent the weekend in Mühldorf and now I'm heading to Bad Reichenhall. I'll be driving near the Austrian border to pick up 23 pallets of salt and then it's off to Kloppenburg, almost all the way up to East Friesland. I've got a fairly early time slot tomorrow at 10 a.m., which is why I was up at 3:30 this morning. They start loading today at 6 a.m., and according to the GPS, I'll get there at 6:07. Perfect timing. It's freezing outside, just 6 degrees Celsius or 43 degrees Fahrenheit, but it's nice and cozy in here. And this trip should be interesting, driving fully loaded through the Castle Mountains in cold weather. But I think this week's going to be a bit more relaxed than the last few. I'm nearly fully loaded with 23.5 tons. The whole process went super smooth, and the staff there were really friendly, which is rare for a Monday morning. I had to declare my truck's empty weight, so I put down 18.5 tons, but I also noted that it's an electric truck with a max weight of 42 tons. They were really curious because they've never seen one before. Even the guy loading the truck was super into it, asking if we needed to watch the axle loads. And they were so nice they even gave me a package of herbal salt. No idea how I'm going to use this much salt, especially since I don't even have a kitchen, but still, pretty cool. Now it's off to Kloppenburg. 870 kilometers fully loaded through the Castle Mountains in winter. If that's not a proper test, I don't know what is. We're heading up the Irschenberg with 42 tons and the truck holds a steady 82 kilometers per hour, pulling 700 kilowatts from the battery. But now, I actually have to brake. Trucks are not allowed on the third lane. Now comes the fun part. A 6% downhill stretch. Let's see how much energy the truck can recover. 400 kilowatts. 450. 470. 500 kilowatts. That's crazy. I wish there was a charging station that could handle 500 kilowatts. I'm at my first charging stop north of Munich with about 32% battery left. I'm charging at 300 kilowatts, and the place is packed with electric transporters, and they're all charging too. As a truck driver, the layout of the station isn't great, and I hope I can get out of here without too much trouble. Honestly, I'm not sure if I find it good or bad that the transporters are blocking the truck chargers, but in the end, it's not the transporter's fault. The real issue is that there just aren't enough charging points. I was away for 5 minutes walking the dog, and now there's a Sprinter parked here. Can't really blame them as the other charger's plug is broken. The Sprinter's charging super slow at just 58 kilowatts, and now my truck's down to 175 kilowatts. But seeing how fully packed this place is, I should just be glad I can charge in the first place. The only problem is, I can't get out. I'd have to drive around the back, but there are cars blocking the way. I can't even reverse because there's already a line behind me. But I'm not in a rush, so I'll figure it out. I'm almost in Würzburg making another stop so I can hit my 10 hours of driving time today, and as expected, these are really tough conditions. Consumption is at 1.3 kilowatt hours per kilometer, definitely higher but still reasonable. There were some hills too, so it's no surprise the range isn't quite hitting the 500 kilometers I managed in summer with a full load, but it's enough to make it to the next charging park within my driving time. I made it to Main Frankenpark, and I'm at my favorite charger. I'm pulling 329 kilowatts, with 324 kilowatts going straight into the battery. The rest probably goes to heating, cooling, or whatever else. I'm taking my 45-minute break here. I could still drive for 39 minutes, but once the break's over, I'll have 1 hour and 57 minutes of driving time left, and I definitely want to make the most of that. Next stop, Eichensell. There's a Volvo FM Electric, but as a vacuum and flushing truck. So cool to see more specialized vehicles coming out as electric versions. A few words about Regeneration. With 42 tons, you have to drive the Iveco a bit differently. It has a single-gear reduction transmission, so the regeneration is really strong even at higher speeds, but it gradually decreases. When I take a turn and engage full regeneration, it hits 530 kilowatts, but the deceleration isn't as strong. I was thinking how a Scania with a manual transmission could increase regeneration a bit more by downshifting. That's the main adjustment when driving fully loaded. Sure, you could just hit the brakes, but that would just waste energy. And normally, you can brake almost everything off when the truck is empty or half loaded, but with a full load, you have to be a bit more careful. But it's amazing to recover almost all the kinetic energy invested in acceleration. I'm now in Eichensell at my regular charging station. I'll charge up, and tomorrow I've got about 5 more hours of driving. I've already parked my trailer, laid out my towel, and overall the day was pretty successful. But now, the big secret of this vehicle, the Iveco SUV has no stand heater. That's a bit of a shock when you think about it, especially in winter when it's really cold. But since it's an electric vehicle, it's not that bad, because you can just leave it running. The buttons and functions for a hotel mode or camp mode are already in the infotainment system, they just don't work yet. So the trick right now is to just leave it running. with the downside that the lights stay on, and you have to lower the suspension completely to prevent the air compressor from kicking in. The high voltage battery also gets cooled, so the energy consumption is fairly high at about 1% per hour. That's quite a bit of energy, but if you were to start the day with a cold battery, you'd end up with a higher consumption as well. Iveco said the hotel mode will be available in the next few weeks, and until then, it's still manageable. From my experience when camping in my Tesla, heating through the whole night is a huge waste of power. As long as it's above 6 degrees Celsius or 43 degrees Fahrenheit, it's comfortable to have some heat in the evening and morning, but you don't need it the whole night. I can sleep fine in the cold as long as the blanket's warm, and my dog always snuggles up when it gets too cold. But once it hits below freezing, I definitely prefer it warmer. I've hooked up the trailer, and I can show you something cool. I have access to this secret technician menu where I can see the battery temperatures. You can see that 33 degrees Celsius or 91 degrees Fahrenheit seems to be the sweet spot where the battery packs are optimally heated. I'll test overnight to see how long the battery holds its temperature. In theory, it should eventually adjust to the outside temperature, so I'll check in the morning to see what the battery temp looks like then. And right now the truck's using 3 kilowatts for the cabin heating. If I kept it on, that would be about 0.5% battery drain per hour. But every now and then, the heating kicks up a bit, and the truck reheats in short bursts. Good morning. It's 3 a.m., and I'm about to do my departure check, but I just spotted this electric Scania and had to talk to the driver. Eric told me his Scania charges at the depot during the day and gets driven at night, which is pretty unique since you need places where you can unload at night. You can see the difference in battery size and range between the Volvo and the Scania just by the driver's facial expression. The difference between 250 and 350 kilometers of range makes a huge difference for daily transport. Quick check on the batteries. About 9 hours later, the packs are still at 16.5 to 18 degrees Celsius or 62 to 64 degrees Fahrenheit, even though it's just 4 degrees Celsius or 39 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Now I'm heading off, with a half-warm battery straight into the Castle Mountains fully loaded. Let's see how long it takes for the battery to warm back up. The Iveco is crushing the climb, pulling 850 kilowatts from the battery. It's really impressive. The diesel truck ahead is struggling up the hill, but my truck is fully loaded too and still holds 82 kilometers per hour without breaking a sweat. Those 1,000 horsepower that are advertised aren't the truck's continuous power, but even this climb is not an issue for the truck. It just powers up at top speed. It's seriously impressive. Now we're going 8% downhill, and with our 42 tons, we're regenerating 580 kilowatts. The truck can actually slow itself down just through recuperation, meaning a huge part of the energy we use climbing up, we're getting back right now. You don't even need to touch the brakes. And overall, the consumption in the hills isn't a lot higher than on flat terrain thanks to the size of the electric motor. I think when buying an electric truck in the future, it won't just be about power, but about the ability to recuperate lots of energy, which is only possible with a big electric motor. The batteries have reached their operating temperature after 1 hour and 6 minutes. Climbing those steep hills and the heavy recuperation helped to warm them, since so much power was going in and out. Plus, the battery wasn't completely cold when I started. From my basic understanding, it looks like around 40 kilowatts are used just for battery heating, which would explain the high consumption yesterday when starting with a cold battery. The consumption should have been around 1 kilowatt hour per kilometer, but it was 1.5. A lot of people say EVs have less range in winter, but I think it's mostly at the start. Once the battery is warm, range stays pretty stable, especially for long-range trucks like this. That's why short trips are tough for electric trucks, with constant battery conditioning. But for long haul, this thing's the perfect winter truck. I've made it to Neuenkirchen-Förden and I have an hour of buffer. I'm using that to top up the battery because I'm down to 8%, even though I only drove 330 kilometers. But with these rough conditions, rain, cold battery, low temperatures, steep hills, and 42 tons, I totally get it. That was a perfect charging stop. I was really tired, so I took a nap. I don't know about you, but I'm the kind of person who sets a ton of alarms and then ends up waking up at the first one, not needing the rest. But somehow having them helps me fall asleep better. When you're super exhausted, there's always that fear of oversleeping, and that wouldn't have been great today. Now I'm back at 97%, and I'll make it to my appointment right on time. Plus, with a full battery, I'm flexible and ready to take on the next trip right away. The job is done, and this place is awesome because it's super modern and well coordinated. They handle a ton of goods in and out, and everything's really streamlined. Right at 10, I was at the ramp. I got to unload using those electric pallet jacks, which made it quick and was a nice change from just sitting in the truck all the time. Unloading with a regular hand jack? No thanks. But with the electric one, it's like playing with a toy. Now I'm empty, and in just 12 kilometers I'll be fully loaded again and then head to Emden. I'm loaded with 23 tons of paper that need to get to Emden pretty urgently. I've got 75% battery, so the 138 kilometers should be no problem. I should even make it to Leer without needing to charge, and then my driving time will be up. I'm at my unloading spot, and they unload from the side with the forklift. Sometimes they need to unload from both sides if they have short forks, but luckily here they've got long ones, so I only had to open one side. I always find it exciting to know what exactly I'm transporting. So I asked what kind of company this is and what they do. Turns out I've been hauling the raw materials for election posters that they will print here. The election season is slowly kicking off, and alongside supporting the energy transition, I'm also supporting democracy. I just hope these posters are for democratic parties. I'm back in Leer and already swapped my trailer. This time I'm hauling tower components that need to go to Paderborn tomorrow. I'll start early in the morning and the truck is charging overnight. It's charging pretty fast right now because no other trucks are charging. With these tower parts, my energy consumption will be higher because they're not exactly aerodynamic, which pushes the consumption way up. But Paderborn isn't that far, so it's all good. Now I'm taking the dog for a walk. See you tomorrow. It's the middle of the night, and we had a little rescue mission. A partner company was driving an Iveco SE Way, and they were down to 0 kilometers range and 4% battery. They wanted to emergency charge at our place, but didn't quite make it. So I went out with the boss to check it out, but we didn't actually need to tow them. We just drove the truck to the next Aral Post charging station and helped the driver. It was his first tour with this truck. When you've got some experience with these electric trucks, you stay way more relaxed because you know the truck will still drive even at 0 kilometers range. But with all the warning sounds and alerts, it really stresses new drivers out and makes them worry they'll get stranded any second. And because the truck has an 800-volt battery, you cannot charge at every charger. So if you are down to a few percent battery and didn't know about it, you definitely get stressed. Good morning! I've been on the road since around 6:30 a.m. and I'm near Osnabrück, heading south toward Paderborn. As expected, the energy consumption this morning was pretty high. These tower components aren't aerodynamic, really heavy, and I've had strong headwinds driving south from Leer. On top of that, the battery was still cold and needed heating. But the consumption will balance out over the day. It's just that the first stretch is a bit tough. I'm heading now to a wind park, and there is no address or house number, but they just sent me a link to a custom Google Maps map. It shows a marked route if you're coming from Paderborn and the different wind park locations. It's an interactive map, so I can see my GPS position live. This Google My Maps tool is pretty awesome and free, perfect for stuff like this. I've been thinking a lot about the best climate control strategy for the winter. After my 11-hour break, I noticed that for the first 2 hours, the battery stayed warm because it was still charging from 25% back up to 100%. But after that, with the climate control off for 9 hours, the outside temperature stayed just above freezing. And thanks to the curtains and the cover I always close up top, the cab stayed warm enough overnight. The battery cooled from around 30 degrees Celsius down to about 15 degrees Celsius, similar to my last test. This means the battery had to warm up again for about an hour in the morning, which led to higher consumption in the first 2 hours of driving. So my theory is, keeping the battery at its optimal temperature overnight during a 9-hour break might actually use about the same amount of energy as letting it cool down and then reheat it in the morning. It's not a huge difference either way, and the impact on range estimation would be more consistent if the battery stayed warm. Of course, I'd need more data to really confirm this. That said, if you're taking a 24-hour break, it obviously wouldn't make sense to keep the battery warm the whole time. One feature I really hope Iveco adds, and I'll definitely suggest this, is the ability to turn off the lights when the truck is in standby. Right now, when the truck is on, the lights, side marker lights, and rear lights all stay on. It'd be much better if the lights automatically turned off when the handbrake is engaged and the light switch is set to off, like how Kia and Hyundai used to handle it. Then the lights would only turn back on when you release the handbrake and prepare to drive. The construction site I was just at was all underwater. The entire access road was flooded, and there were a lot of trucks ahead of me. Since I don't have much battery left, I'm using the 3 or 4 hours I'd have to wait to charge the truck. I'm at 5% and the truck is showing limited power. I'm going to test it with full throttle. It's still pulling 350 kilowatts, but it's limited to 55 kilometers per hour. Earlier, I was driving at 65 kilometers per hour on the country road, and at 8%, it showed 0 kilometers of range. At 6%, there's a jerk, and then it was limited to 55 kilometers per hour. But with 300 kilowatts, you can still climb hills, though at 55 kilometers per hour, you should no longer drive on the highway. I arrived with 4% in the battery, And this is a cool charging park here. It's quite large, and the new layout from Ionity is perfect for the truck. Unfortunately, it's very close to the center of the city, but there are industrial areas on the left and right where I parked my trailer. I did not want to park it near the unloading site because the parking area where the trucks were standing had very soft gravel. If the support legs of the trailer would sink, I wouldn't be able to get it out. But it's great when I can combine waiting with charging, because it happens quite often that I have to wait till I get unloaded. I'm back at the unloading site, and I haven't lost any time because the previous trucks are unloaded, and I can be unloaded right away. Wow. I'm now in Winterberg. It's freezing cold, snowing, and I loaded a pile of wood on the trailer. I had to climb up with a ladder, and because everything was a bit icy, it was really dangerous. But now everything is secured, and I'm heading back through the mountains to the north, almost all the way to Flensburg. It's definitely more challenging than driving kitchen appliances to Spain. I really enjoy driving in winter, but driving a truck in winter around freezing temperatures with wet roads and 41 tons is something I haven't done before. So far, the truck gives a very stable impression, but you definitely have to watch your speed and take it slow. I once had a moment with the Scania where the road was wet from rain. I took a turn and applied the regen to test it out. It was interesting to see how the regen could potentially cause the vehicle to skid. Normally the ESP takes over with the brakes and the regen gets disabled. The Scania handled it well, but I'm not sure how the Iveco would do in the same situation. It hasn't happened yet, but it's something to keep an eye on because some cars handle it poorly, which could put you in a dangerous situation. Last year I drove the ID Buzz in Switzerland, and it is also a cool winter vehicle. Despite having rear-wheel drive, it had great traction. We were able to drive up places where other vehicles couldn't. The only downside is that it drives like an automatic, meaning when you're in drive and let off the brake, it starts rolling. That makes it hard to control the acceleration. So if you're stuck in snow or sand, you can't just gently wiggle your way out with momentum like you can with other cars. We actually got stuck once. My Tesla handled this much better. Even in the desert, it was never a problem. You can always free yourself from tricky situations if you have precise control over the throttle. It's the same with the truck. When I put it in drive and let off the brake, it doesn't do anything initially, and then you can accelerate very finely. The good thing with electric vehicles is that their traction controls are much more sensitive than a diesel engine's. I've finished for the day and will spend the night at a Aral rest area. Although it's 8 p.m., there was still some space available. It cost €6 without a meal voucher. I could have driven for another hour, but it's better to have a good parking spot and be able to get an early start tomorrow. I'm topping up the battery and then I'll have a quick dinner. This Tesla driver wanted to charge next to me. He got out, looked at my sign hanging there, and is now heading to Fastnet. Here's an unfiltered look into my kitchen. Food is definitely a challenge, but having a fridge makes it easier. This is the typical meal I eat all the time, a wrap. I always add a bit of avocado, hummus, a bell pepper or cucumber, and I like to add some vegan chunks. Then I top it with barbecue sauce. I usually eat 2 of these, and I make a third one to have something to eat while driving. It's not very varied, but tomorrow I'll have an apple or some soy yogurt in the morning. I've always been a fan of sticking to one dish, so I know exactly what to buy, and then don't experiment too much. Good morning. It's 5:30 a.m. and I'm starting the day. I heated the truck overnight, so I've used up a bit of battery. It's a relaxing morning routine when I know I can drive to the charging station and use those few minutes of charging to grab some coffee and brush my teeth. I just saw a Volvo FH electric charging as well. The driver said that in winter, with a full load, the FH electric can manage about 180 kilometers. Under 200 kilometers in winter is tough, but he said he plans around it, and it's part of his job. I'm driving through the L tunnel now, and there was a 45-minute traffic jam. Because of that, I have to exceed my driving time to reach the next stop. I'll make a note with the tachograph, and this is actually the first time I have to do it. I've stopped and made a printout, noting that the traffic jam was much longer than the GPS said. It will only be needed if I get checked in the next 30 days, since the data is only stored for 30 days. I'm now northwest of Hamburg, and there's a nice truck parking spot here, which has a pretty good layout. Unfortunately, people park a bit awkwardly, so they should add a no parking sign. But what I really like is that the truck charging stations are separated from the car charging stations. That way the cars don't even think about coming here. Of course, the network connection and wiring is probably more complex and costs more, but it definitely makes more sense this way. I'm now in Heide and just unloaded my trailer. This construction site right here is the battery cell production facility for Northvolt. Northvolt went bankrupt in the US, and parts of the company in Europe were bought by Volvo and Scania. But construction is still ongoing here, and they plan to start battery production in 2027. Northvolt was seen as a beacon of hope for becoming more independent from China in battery production, and now we can only hope that this factory, along with what Volvo and Scania have taken over, will contribute to that in the coming years. For anyone who says they don't like driving through the city because it's too tight, imagine driving through downtown Hamburg with a 16.5-meter truck. It's the usual traffic chaos, and I'm still fighting through it for another half hour, but luckily I'm not on a tight schedule. I'm in Hamburg Moorfleet, and I was just at the counter and told them I'll be leaving tomorrow at 7 a.m. They assigned me row 9, where I'll drive over to park. There are 6 truck charging stations here, and there's a nice FH electric. I parked a bit to the side because if I parked at the very front, we'd have to share the charging power. In theory, 6 trucks could fit here, but the middle one would never get out. The driver of the FH electric didn't speak German or English, but what I gathered is that he always drives from Hamburg to Wismar, a round trip of 260 kilometers, and he can't make it without charging. He was really frustrated about that, and I can understand it. An ideal solution for this would be mobile chargers at the unloading point in Wismar. And my new winter routine is to charge up to 100% in the evening, heat overnight, and in the morning charge again while brushing my teeth and getting a coffee. In those 10 minutes, I recover the percentage I lost overnight, so I get maximum range in the winter. This morning, I picked up 8 life rafts. They're going to the MS Helgoland, so I'm heading to Bremerhaven, which is a 2-hour drive via Bremen. Driving with an open trailer in the winter is twice as hard because everything's wet, dirty, slippery, and dangerous, while with a closed trailer, everything stays dry inside. I have a lot of respect for all the truck drivers who do this regularly or drive a lot in construction traffic. I'm at the port in Bremerhaven, and there's the MS Helgoland and another truck delivering parts as well. We're waiting for the crane to lift these frames and my life rafts onto the ship. Since I'm second in line, I have some time to walk the dog. Now I'm done, and we'll head back to Leer for the weekend. I've also got the info on what's coming up next week. On Monday, I'll be loading plants, and then it's off to the southwest, through France, heading toward the Freiburg area. I've arrived at the depot, parked the trailer, and will quickly secure a parking spot because there are so many trucks here on Fridays, and I absolutely need the plug on the left. The next few weeks during the winter will be really interesting. It's also the best kind of awareness work, because if my big 42-ton truck can make its way through Germany and Europe in winter, then everyone can do it in an electric car. And maybe it'll encourage more freight companies to look into electric trucks as well. Else, I'm wishing you a great Sunday evening, or whenever you watch this video, and see you next week. Ciao.